Okay, guys, now, this is not, oh, here, I can do it this way.
Yeah.
Not great. Here we go.
Okay. So what are we going to cover today? So first, we're going to cover, again, like why planning is important. So this is actually the first time that I've done this, let's call it new and improved version of things I talk about all of the time. And so what's really exciting about this, I get to give a lot of little tips and tricks and a few stories. But it's important to talk about why we need to plan. And so we're going to start with a really, really brief and basic overview of government benefits, not meant to get into that so much. Then we're going to talk about common pitfalls in estate planning, a little bit about special needs trusts versus able accounts, and then a few thoughts and ideas, and maybe even some, challenges to preconceived notions on developing a team of support for the future. So, and again, this is why planning is so important. Really, the first step, it's important to know why you're doing something, probably almost even more important than what you're doing. Should know the reason why. So going to do that brief overview. So assuming everyone here has been through something with the government benefits, SSI, SSDI, DAC, it is beyond confusing. And part of the reason it's so confusing is because they want to make it confusing. It's so hard and it's so challenging. Going to explain it again, really simply. This is not an entire government benefits presentation, but going to highlight what's important. And I try to break it down. So there's SSI. That is the least important and the most talked about and the most complicated. The reason why it's the most complicated, only the government knows, but the reason it's the least important is because eventually, for almost everyone with an adult or young adult in this room, they're going to be eligible for something called the DAC. That's essentially Social Security off the parent's work history, assuming one parent paid into Social Security. Now, what's important about that is that means the SSI, in all purposes, goes away, and the individual becomes eligible for Medicare in addition to Medicaid. If there's one benefit that's most important, that would be Medicaid. Medicaid is what pays for waiver services. Medicaid is what pays for a lot of the support around living. Section 8 is a very, very small part of that. Without the services, a home in the middle of nowhere doesn't really do anyone any good. And Medicaid is what can be $60,000, $80,000 a year in funding and services and support and waivers. And every state calls Medicaid something different. In every state, there's different rules. But that is the primary benefit that we're really going to be focusing on protecting. So again, supplemental Social Security income. The important thing to remember about SSI is it's the gateway to Medicaid. In almost every state, SSI and Medicaid are almost interchangeable to the point where they get confused. In Connecticut, where our taxes only border California for wanting to tax us, we actually have a $1,600 limit on SSI because the state would be broke without our extra $400. It's not actually the reason, but just to show how complicated it is. So SSDI, or what we call the DAC, is off the parent's work record. It'll be half or 75%. So if the parent's full Social Security is $2,000, when the parent retires, that individual will not be on SSI anymore. They will not have an asset test for SSI, and they will be eligible for $1,000 a month. Again, this is just a brief overview going through of what's important to protect. Medicaid. Medicaid is what is so important. For most families and individuals not eligible for what we call, the disabled adult Medicaid, and it's, again, different in every single state. but this is what really provides that support for the 24/7 care. This is what has the asset limits. This is what, if an elderly person needs to go in a group home, or sorry, in a nursing home and has to give away their assets, again, that's Medicaid. Medicaid's always the payer of last resort. And that Medicaid is so complicated and it's so important. Many times there can be extremely long wait lists. Probably telling you guys something that everyone in the room already knows, but it's so important to keep Medicaid. Most of the other benefits don't, they pale in comparison to the benefit that Medicaid could provide, 50, 100,000 plus a year, all these services and support. So really making sure that you maintain eligibility for Medicaid is priority number one. There's certain programs and certain benefits that, maybe $200 a month, but Medicaid is the real big one that we want to make sure, because it's not always so easy to get back. And if you do get back, in some states, the waiver wait lists are 150 years or for some services. So it's really important to make sure that you set things up in a way that can maintain Medicaid eligibility. Generally speaking, that means no more than $2,000 in the individual's name. There are certain exceptions that we'll get to in a little bit.
Hey, Andrew,
Yes.
I just want to, I'm going to step back for just a second and ask you to just explain maybe in a slightly bit more detail. So for example, like my son, Johnny, he's almost 23 and he has SSI.
Yep.
He gets, I don't know, it's like $780 a month, which is the federal portion plus a little bit of state add-on, right?
Yep.
Husband and I, we're still alive.
Mm-hmm.
When we turn 65 or when we
Which
die,
is like 30 years away, right?
right? How does that happen? How does that switch from SSI to disabled adult benefits? How does that happen?
Liz, do you want to answer that one? Or put her on the spot right there?
Sure. So the switch is actually quite simple, but complicated at the same time. So it all goes along with your application to Social Security. So not when you retire, but when you file for Social Security. It's actually part of every standard Social Security application that you have the option to identify yourself as having a disabled child. So then with your application, you just want to make sure the application could be done over the phone to make sure that it's clear who your child is, what their Social Security number is, and they will, as Social Security Administration does, confirm who the individual is, whether or not they do have a disability assessment on file, and they will move forward with the benefit for the child. So that would be 50% of what the individual filing for Social Security would have received if they filed at full retirement age.
Okay. Still a little confused, but I'm going to let you go on. I think we'll get back to this.
Yeah. No, we will. And that was a great question.
Okay. Go ahead, Andrew. I didn't mean to.
No, I love it. Go to the next one. So in Jill's example, so let me just use an example. So let's say that they were meeting with a traditional financial planner who said they're going to live a long time and wait until 70 to retire to maximize their Social Security, which is traditional advice. Well, most financial planning doesn't take into consideration a lot of these families. And now if, let's say, Jill starts collecting Social Security at 62, then her son, 2 years after that, will be eligible for Medicare in addition to Medicaid. And there are actually special insurance policies for dual eligible. So just like all those Medicare supplements that were going all over TV at the end of last year, well, there's special ones for what's called the dual special needs population, Medicare and Medicaid. we actually have a specialist who helps with health insurance for that dual eligible population. And there's a lot of extra benefits that can be provided, technology assistance devices, dental, other medications, lots of things, all at no extra cost. And Medicare is taken a lot more places than Medicaid, but the card's like United Healthcare. So it looks like private insurance, but combines the best of that with Medicaid and Medicare, and the individual's income will go up. So now whatever Jill's benefit would be at age 67 is what it would, assuming that's her full retirement age. Even if she starts at 62, it would be half of her 67 benefit. So it's something to consider as well, for the Medicare eligibility potentially, as well as the higher what's called DAC. It's a lot like SSDI, but it's off the parent's work record. Now, again, this isn't an entire government benefits presentation, and we do want to make sure we get to the other parts, but it is important to mention that if you have multiple children with disabilities, that's something to be careful of, because there's what's called a family maximum. And essentially, Social Security will only pay so much off one person's work record. So it is very important if you have multiple disabled children, and even maybe a spouse who didn't work, to really make sure that you look into that as part of the planning as well.
Was there anything else you wanted to say about this slide? I don't think you went over these points. No?
I did 2 years.
Okay.
SSDI is a lot better. Yes, Medicare is better. Sorry, I kind of went on that in the previous one. This is the first time doing this presentation. I'm really excited to get to the next parts. They have more of like the memes, and they're a little more fun too. But no, Medicare, SSDI, Medicare, they have way less restrictions. They have so many less restrictions than SSI. SSI is horrible. It's so confusing. It's so convoluted. I don't necessarily talk about it. Question DAC income is just like SSDI income, and it's really simple. You make under $13.50 a month gross, you're good. We can get more complicated than that, but that's way better than SSI. I actually was on SSI, Medicare, Medicaid, the DAC. I'm lucky that I found an interest that I get paid to talk about the thing I love to talk about. And so I also, again, speak from some experience with being on these and getting off them. Okay, just going to hang on this slide for just a second. And there's lots of good questions. So if we go over, again, I'm good with this. This is just an overview of Medicare and Medicaid and how they intercept and overlap. Ideally, the families for everyone in this room or in this Zoom will eventually be on Medicare and Medicaid. So it's also important to note that if an individual is only on Medicare and only on the DAC and they don't need Medicaid services, there's no asset limit tests. So again, SSDI, the DAC, and Medicare, no asset limit tests. One other important thing I want to mention about Medicare for the next slide is that you can make as much money as you want and you will never lose Medicare once you've had it as being somebody who's disabled. If Elon Musk was disabled, he could be on Medicare right now. They would ask for a little premium for it after 80 months or something like that. So it's also, that's another reason why Medicare is so important, is you can't lose it. So the next part is how you can be financially prepared. So one of the most common presentations I give is about ABLE accounts. I was an ABLE ambassador for 2020 for the ABLE National Resource Center. I speak about ABLE accounts. I'm actually flying to California in May to speak to a lot of other financial planners and help them educate on ABLE accounts. Liz Yoder helps write articles with me. Again, very We talk about these all the time, and they are like savings accounts, but for individuals who have a disability. The most important thing about an ABLE account is that it's shielded from that $2,000 asset limit test. And next slide. And so an ABLE account can be great because a lot of times it doesn't make sense to, and we'll get into this later, open up a special needs trust just for a few $1,000s. You have to pay a bunch of lawyers who are crazy expensive. And, to administer a trust, and even just setting up a trust is a few $1,000s. It's really not an either or question, but an ABLE account can be a great way to have some money that's able to be saved for the individual and for their use. Now, I'm going to oversimplify because I do entire presentations on ABLE accounts. An ABLE account can essentially be used for everything, because as long as it benefits the individual with the disability, and with the population that we're talking about, or even myself, what in their life that they would need is not affected by their disability. So it's really liberal as far as what you can spend money on. You can move money from the old college savings, old child savings accounts into ABLE accounts. They are a great option. Now, in many states, the state has a clawback provision where the state can recover that money when the individual passes away. So it's not where we like to see all of the money go. You can only put in $16,000 per year, and $16,000 sounds like a lot, but if you're looking to, fund somebody's care over their lifetime, you're going to need a lot more than that.
I'm going to interject.
Go, yeah.
Editorial comment here. Sorry. I think this is on your next slide, but the thing about ABLE accounts, when it comes to our population, right? We're talking about the severe autism population. Yes. The amount of money really needed to provide for their long-term care vastly exceeds the $100,000 limit, which is it's a de facto limit, because after that you lose SSI, right? So for us, I think ABLE accounts are definitely helpful and something people definitely should do. But they're not as useful as for other people with disabilities who really use these for more incidental type expenditures. That's been, my experience.
I agree with Jill on the one exception of the $100,000. Remember, I said SSI. I've never had anyone save $100,000 by the time that would matter, because remember, everyone loses SSI eventually. But I'm not saying you should save more than 500,000. I just felt like correcting Jill because her point was so great otherwise. The limit's usually about $500,000, but it doesn't make sense to get there. Okay. Now we get to the fun stuff. No, but who will manage the money? And I think it's important. And can we do a poll question, Jill? I don't know if you can. If
yeah,
it's too much, then okay. Or people could just say yes. While I'm talking over this page, if anyone has an account from ComputerShare, just type it in the chat or something, or a poll. I'm just curious, or if you have something and you've seen something from a place called ComputerShare. But so who will manage the money? And again, it's to make things as easy as possible. But it's important to take into consideration how much money is needed. When we do financial planning for families, we do financial planning for 2 or 3. We do financial planning for the person with the disability, and the parents. Tax planning. Taxes are very important because, well, nobody likes paying taxes, but over the long term, trusts are in a much higher tax bracket. So many individuals and many, are not used to structuring the investments in the long term in a way that is both tax efficient and designed to generate an income stream. It's also really important to try to get at least as accurate as possible, projection based upon a realistic life expectancy. Depending on the disability, it morbid, but the life expectancy of the child, is not going to be typical Social Security age 80 life expectancy. Sometimes it will be, sometimes it won't be. So also taking a look to help plan for that. I asked about Computer Share just because if you have an account with Computer Share, if you take one thing away from this presentation, don't. I encourage you to move it to another account. Ask an attorney who's dealt with them or anyone like me, and it'll take hours and hours and hours to try to get money out of them and a few minutes to transfer it while you're around. My wife's mother-in-law and a lot of old life insurance companies, MetLife, Prudential, John Hancock, all went public and they issued all their policyholders 5 shares of stock. My wife's grandmother passed away. They're in Florida. She asked about this old life insurance policy from like the 1950s. I was all excited to try and find it on the microfiche, right? And I said, let me know when you find a Computer Share statement. She's like, I've been through everything. I couldn't find the Computer Share statement. She messages me like 2 hours later, I hate you. So, okay, moving on.
Yeah, so basically almost 90% don't have a Computer Share account.
Oh, or they're shy.
Yeah, I do, and I will
Yeah.
totally vouch that it's been a nightmare. Okay.
Well, but not if you can take care of it while you're still alive. It's very easy to just transfer to like a Fidelity account.
Well,
so that's
I
why
should
we
do
always
that. Thank
encourage
you.
it.
If I
You
take one
should.
thing away from your presentation today, that's what I got to do. Okay. Thank you, Andrew.
Perfect. You're very welcome.
Okay.
Yeah, and you can just hit the down arrow. Okay. But what if you have no money? You can try winning the lotto. I don't think that will work. I had a few other ideas, but I thought that was enough to kind of get the point across. But I also want to say that most commonly, we suggest to leave the money for after you're gone, because there's a few different tools, and a lot of the tools to leave money in fund a trust, which is the most common way to leave money in a way that protects assets. It's more tax efficient, and it's more just efficient in general to have that be funded upon your passing. Trusts are their own taxes, their own filings. They pay higher taxes. There's more complications. So everyone has enough in their life going on right now. We really encourage people to, really take a look at trying not to fund really small trusts and having to deal with that. Additionally, if there's multiple family members, it might make sense to, see what plans that they, have and try to talk and coordinate. We'll talk about that a little bit more later. I also just want to say, be cautious of life insurance agents. I can sell life insurance. We talk about it from the aspect of solving a problem of planning, right? Of taking a little money now to leave money for when it's needed. But a lot of life insurance can be very much missold. Life insurance agents, generally speaking, make what you pay the first year, and they're not incentivized after that. So again, be very careful. It can be very complex. It's important to work with an independent agent who understands. Just because you're the parent of somebody with a disability does not mean you're a great person. So be careful of trusting somebody just because they just passed their insurance license after a weekend. Because like I said, it's really important to just make sure that you know what you're doing. On the flip side to that, I get furious when I see parents and their disabled child is still very young and they're not saving anything for themselves because they're buying all of this expensive insurance and they have no savings. We had a situation where the lady was told that she couldn't buy a house at all because it would affect her children down the road. And she was an attorney. She was smart. She worked for a startup, but she was so afraid of anything. And this was some of the advice she got. So again, just be careful. Also, that uncle who talks about investing on the weekends or at like Thanksgiving is probably the last person you want to ask about a lot of these things. Or I think that was actually another slide, but we'll move on.
Hey, can I ask you a question,
Yeah.
Andrew? With regards to life insurance, because in my experience, this is something a lot of parents do turn to
Yes.
provide for, some pot of cash for, the moment they die, right?
Yep.
So can you just provide people, paint a little picture of how that might work in terms of let's say you have an average couple, they're in their 50s, they're pretty good health. They want to pay premiums term, not whole life insurance.
Yep.
They want to pay premiums and they want to have, I don't know, let's say $1 million
Yep.
when they die. They want to buy $1 million second to die policy.
Mhm.
What kind of premiums should people expect? Do you have a sense?
Yeah, no, I do. I mean, I do it all the time. For $1 million at 50 years old, probably looking in the range of $5,000 to $10,000 a year for a second to die. Now there's what's called whole life. There's another term called permanent, which basically describes life insurance that's not meant to have an end date. And there's what I like to describe as term forever. Commonly it's universal. It looks like term. You're not doing it for an investment. It's a poor investment. And, you're doing it for, like Jill said, the second to die, but we call it term forever, usually $5,000 to $10,000 a year if they're in pretty good health for $1 million. So if you want to do some, quick math, for fun, let's say like best of health, like great rate, 50 years old, $1 million at $5,000 a year. If you live to 50 more years, sorry, I hope at 50 you live to 50 more years is $250,000. The insurance company at 100 still guaranteed paid out $1 million 4 times tax-free. So that's what I mean. Life insurance can be a great tool. And on the illustrations that an insurance agent's supposed to provide to you, right, it will say what's called the IRRDB. It'll calculate that rate of return, right? And you can see, almost as an investment, you could look at it that way. But it's a great way to make sure that that money will be there, be able to fund a trust, guaranteed, tax-free. And it's important that, you have something that another tip is an error that I see. And we're definitely going to go over, but I'm good with that. So there's this long-term care on life insurance, but that doesn't make sense for our population. It's a little bit too much to get into. I'm just saying like what I commonly see kind of like being missold and like mistakes we have to fix. Also, if you have a lot of whole life, I'm looking at you, Northwestern Mutual, for the people in the room that have that, or a lot of other companies that have mutual in them. And if you have lots and lots of whole life policies, lots of times we find that people are overpaying, that they can, stop paying, spend money on things that they want, take that money and, get a new policy. Again, this is very generalization. It's very complicated. And it shouldn't be so complicated, but that all the more reason it's important to work with somebody. Can I plug us, like us, or just somebody who's independent, who can work with more than one company and who gives a crap about you, because there's no incentive for them financially. For us, the incentive's not financial.
Well, partly you do have to, buy your dinner, but okay.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. I will stop. Let me make a comment that I did see a number of questions. I am going to let Andrew go and continue, but I will get to the questions. Okay.
Okay.
So just be patient. Okay. Go ahead, Andrew.
Oh, and Jill, I'll make an offer because I like you so much in your mission. For all the questions that we get, if there's any that are not answered to, okay, we will respond to all of them in as much as we can in an email afterwards. By we, I mean, I will make my employee Liz do it. Okay.
Okay. Thanks, Liz.
Yes.
All right.
Okay. So next. So
Thanks, Andrew.
You're welcome, Liz. So yes, this is actually my Christmas sweater. And I bring this up just because, again, another just something that I see. And again, Jill asked me to do some of the pitfalls that I avoid for this presentation. And I guess if you're from New York, there's something called IRAs. Liz added that. So, but retirement money, 401ks, 403bs, IRAs, Roth IRAs. So there's a new law that came out, and it said that you're only allowed to do something called a stretch if an individual is disabled, for a disabled beneficiary. And this is the perfect example of just because the government says you can do something does not mean you should do something. My wife liked to tell me this. There was something on Facebook Marketplace. It was a go-kart that was only $400. It went 50 miles an hour and the brakes didn't work. I could buy it. That sounded fun. It doesn't mean I should. There are just so many examples of that. So sometimes too, especially in financial planning or news, it's like, oh, they came out with this, right? It must be better for me. Or, you know, I have this option available. Yes, you should evaluate it, but I have never once see this make the most sense. Again, just because you can doesn't mean you should. It's probably the worst asset that you could leave to a disabled individual. It makes taxes and, you know, maintaining that ever so important Medicaid so much harder, more complicated. It's a mess.
But can I ask you, Andrew, let's say a lot of
No.
people here do have 401ks,
Yep.
right? How can we use the 401ks to benefit our disabled children?
So, okay, so two examples. So one is, depending on the age and the health, sometimes it makes sense to take some of the money out to then buy a life insurance policy, right? Or for example, you started getting that SSI money and you can buy that second to die policy, or the individual can pay your rent and then you can buy the policy. Another example is, let's say that you have more than one sibling, right? Or sorry, there's more than one sibling. Then one of the things that you might want to consider is, well, you know, so this example is there's one with a disability and one without. And they think because the one with the disability can do this stretch, that they should leave that to them, when it's actually the opposite's true. You want to leave the one without the disability, the IRA or the Roth IRA, because they don't have those, you know, benefits that might, you know, be jeopardized. Does that make sense? You could leave them the house or leave them something else if you have something else.
Oh,
right.
Right.
So repositioning.
Could you put 401k assets into an ABLE account?
You have to take the money out and pay the taxes. So, yep. Or again, you can take the money out and pay the taxes and buy a life insurance policy. So there are options. And it's really, really individualized. I think, and again, the main thing to take away from it is that you can't get, so the 401ks, IRAs, et cetera, have not been taxed ever. The government wants their tax money. So think about something that's never been taxed that will be taxed, is there's really no way out of, leaving it to somebody without paying taxes somehow. But in the case of if the individual is disabled, it's not just the taxes that can be hurt, it's the income that can really jeopardize their benefits as well, which is a much bigger deal than the taxes. So you'd rather paying taxes as the parent, you could do. Parent could take the money out, convert it to a Roth IRA, buy life insurance. There's tons of strategies available. So got me going for a little bit. How you can be legally prepared. So this is the simplest special needs trust overview you're ever going to see. It's a part of some other presentations, and I even shortened it a little bit more. Here's the part you need to know. We can go to the next slide. And that is that a special needs trust is designed to protect benefits from the individual. So special needs trust in a lot of ways is like an ABLE account. So in that example, the $2,000 asset limit, right? If money's in a special needs trust, it can be exempt from that $2,000 asset limit. And that's why a special needs trust is so important.
I will say from personal experience that when you apply for SSI, the Social Security people will ask to see the special needs trust and will review it in some detail for the provisions, to make sure that the provisions are protective, right, of the assets. It
Yes,
somehow I passed muster, but I imagine there are some that don't.
yes, then yes. And there's two types of special needs trusts. Okay. And that's on this slide. So think of that. Just remember this. It's always better to use somebody else's money, right? It's always better to get somebody else to pay for dinner. It's always better to use somebody else's money. A first party trust in most is only really if it was unavoidable or there was a mistake. So if an individual is left money and there was no trust set up, they will have to create a first party special needs trust. These are overseen by the court. They're subject to, again, court probate supervision. They're so much more restrictive on what the asset can be used for. Additionally, they have a payback clause where any money that's not used and that's left over, the state can go after that. Third party trusts, on the other hand, are way more flexible. They design it. There's third party special needs trusts and that we see for individuals who may never need them. Sometimes with some of the moderate end, right? We don't know. Maybe there's a chance they may not be on benefits. They may. Trusts have the flexibility. The third party special needs trust can be designed with a lot more flexibility to buy things, to hold things. And the best part is you can set them up now with the provisions. There's so much more control. If you don't have any trust now, there's no reason to have a first party trust. A first party trust is, and maybe if there's an accident or some malpractice, or again, something's not planned correctly, it's super important to do in your planning.
Or if they make their own money. Right?
That gets pretty yeah, but
which is not the case with our people, by the way.
Which is not,
with our
yeah,
severe autism
and then they'd have to make enough where it wouldn't make sense to go into an ABLE account, because for the most part, a first party special needs trust can't reduce your income. So it's getting pretty complicated, but I'd never see it for your population, let alone many others.
True.
Yeah. So common mistakes and tips. Don't use the attorney who helped you buy the house. I'm going to say that again. Don't use the attorney who helped you buy the house. So now do go through the pile of documents your attorney gave you. I just had a call last night of a lovely individual. She was so much fun. And she's like, I have all my papers the attorney gave me. And I know the attorney. She's one of my favorite attorneys to work with. And, but you got to go through the documents. So I'm going to give you my fun example, and I'm not making this up. I'm with a client, we're with the attorney, we're reviewing their will. And their will says they have two children. One has severe autism, the other does not. And it says, half my money is divided equally among my two children. The other half goes to so-and-so special needs trust. So what did they just do? 25% goes to one, 75% goes to the other, right? And only 25 and only a portion of it's in the special needs trust. This was an attorney who did seminars in the area and is known for doing this. Estate planning and some of the trust funding, again, it's very complicated, but at the same time, it's not. With attorneys, there's a few qualifications. If they are a certified elder law attorney, there's very few attorneys in the country who meet that qualification. Elder law falls under special needs. So usually a certified elder law attorney has it's much harder to get than a certified financial planner like I am, which was not, and Liz too. So there's also the Academy of Special Needs Planners, which you just need to pay $150 a month to be a member of, more or less. But that still shows that they at least have some dedication to working with individuals with special needs. So very important to also ask them what type of trust you're doing and why. Your third-party trust should never be inside your will. it should have its own separate document. If you take a second thing away from me today, other than computer share, it's that the trust should always be separate, not inside of the will. And if you see an attorney, you should ask them that. Some other things here, usually I find a lot of times when, the individual is turning 18 and graduates the school system is a lot of times when we get a lot of planning from parents because it's just a whole nother world. It's complicated. There's all the things we just spoke about and more. Well, generally speaking, there's a lot of other documents, especially, the parents and the individual should have, and it makes sense to update them all at once. Pretty sure it just takes the attorney just filling in a little bit to kind of do some of the medical directives or power of attorneys for yourself, living wills. If somebody last poll wasn't that successful, but feel free to, comment if you've heard of a letter of intent. I have seen more financial planners and attorneys talk about letters of intent than I have seen letters of intent in existence. Essentially what it is an informal document saying what your, preferences about the person you're caring for, what they like to do, about them, some things that just aren't in any legal documents. Although that's a great thing to do, generally we find there just isn't that much time in the day, and it's not updated, it's not kept up with. So I've never seen where somebody should pay for a letter of intent. Again, it's really nice to have. If you can do a little bit of it, it doesn't need to be anything formal, right? But, that would be the non-legal parts. Okay, so this is the last section, guys. And I'll happy to go back to anything beforehand. So we're going to talk about building the right support network. I think this might be my favorite image during the entire presentation. And so again, it's a lot of work to be a caregiver. And it's also, again, really important to make sure that take care of your own financial future as well. Go back to that example where that family was still renting. They weren't saving anything. And because they really thought that, they couldn't even buy a house because it would jeopardize their individual from potentially losing benefits that individual may or may not need, in that case, 20, 30 years from now, right? So, it's important to not necessarily independence, but financial independence, right? To try to, again, leave things as well as you can. And next slide. So, Jill, can I say the question that I asked you last night when I said I was trying to prove a point? Is that okay if I share? Okay. So I asked, and this would be a nice poll. How many hours a week do you spend, helping take care of, your loved one? And I asked Jill, and she said, well, he doesn't live at home. I said, I know, I'm just trying to prove a point. And I'll get to that point momentarily. And she goes, well, he doesn't live at, but my daughter. And I said, no, how many hours? She's like, oh, well, only 10 hours a week. He's somewhere else. 10 hours a week, that's a part-time job, right? At $20 an hour, right? That would be $10,000 a year if you could find somebody. And I'm sure, because Jill's been doing this and everything she does, it would take somebody 2-3 times as long, right? And not as well. So think about, when somebody says, I don't have a family member, I don't have a support system, we say, that's not the person who you probably want to leave in charge regardless. Think about all of the responsibility that you're putting on them. And especially think about if it's a sibling or a cousin and somebody wanting to live their own lives. And a lot of times, we have cases where they say, oh, well, it's the lawyer. Like the lawyer is going to be good. The lawyer is going to be responsible. And we have a whole paper that we've published on why siblings are bad, right? To be the trustees. Because when it comes to special needs trust, remember, the individual has no control. You have to do everything. They need money to pay property taxes, for foods, right? Or for food, for everything, maintenance, the benefits, the attorneys, that just everything that all needs to be handled. And the great news is that can be delegated, right? It's important to plan now, not later.
So Andrew, I would say that this is one of the top questions that parents
Okay.
have, right? They
Yep.
kind of assume that siblings, if there are siblings who are willing and capable, or other family members, can step in and, be trustees of the special needs trust. They can be
Yep.
guardians, they can be conservators, they can, manage all, they can be
But
case managers. But we know that's not really realistic as to a lot of siblings. So then the families are like, well, who? It's not like I have $1 million where I can go hire, professionals to do this work. And as we know, the state agencies that are supposed to be, the case managers, often, they never even meet. They never go out and
yeah,
even see our kids. So
yeah.
this is a huge gap, in the system. I'm not that I'm like interrupting and want to like
Well, you
say,
are, but
oh,
it's
it's
okay.
impossible. Whatever you're about to say is bunk. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying like this is a really huge need and a growing need.
Yeah. But it's also important, again, too, even if that you think you have somebody, right? Again, be careful, right? And our paper has not been published. It's with the Financial Therapy Association. It's like a boring research paper that only people like Jill might enjoy. We'll send it to her afterwards and we'll send it out. Again, it will be either public or in some, I don't know, fancy journal article or something on this, if people want a really boring read to fall asleep with tonight. That's nowhere as entertaining as me talking. I think the next slide has some information on this with some answers.
Sorry,
maybe.
So I'm going to
Yeah.
interject again and say our webinar in April actually will feature somebody who manages a nonprofit that provides professional everything we've been talking about. Financial management, trusteeship, conservatorship / guardianship / case management. I can go on. So that's going to be in April, and it's a group called the Good Shepherd Fund. Now, of course, they charge, right? So it's not a good option if you don't have that big trust. But I just wanted to say there will be more information on this in the series. Okay.
And also, Jill, and you go to the next slide, but think about, to my point where I was describing how much work it was, right, to do what you do. And yes, they charge, but at the same time, I mean, I've had the discussions with people, and our end result is they couldn't afford not to do this, right? That it's so important. It's so much. So again, who can manage if not for family or friends? There are specialty trust companies that exist that focus on special needs. Many trust companies don't work with special needs at all. The reason is because it's so much work, or if they do, they charge more. They can help you organize everything in one place ahead of time, now, not later. Living, housing, and I think that's our next slide, which not ready for just yet, but is about real estate. And as far as real estate goes, most trust companies don't want to manage real estate because it's a lot of work. So, and do you think your loved one will be better served by a banker, right, or a social worker? So one of the trust companies that I commonly suggest is a company, and Liz can paste the link in the chat. Make sure to say that you attended our webinar just because we like them. Hope Trust is one of many that we like, that does work in a lot of places and focuses really exclusively. Oh, Hope Trust is presenting. Okay. I love Hope Trust. So I'm glad that I didn't know it was them and you didn't know who I was going to talk about. Doesn't that make that recommendation so much better, Jill? Right? If we both came up with the same recommendation. So Hope Trust is fantastic. And we refer people to them quite often. Is it Debbie or probably not Josh? I think, I don't know. Anyway, but they're, again, who have the services, who can help coordinate things. But it's important to know that there's still roles. The big brother can be a big brother. There's something called trust protector, which is exactly like it sounds. And I want to add one other thing before the essentially last slide. And we did pretty good with the hour. before questions. So that is many times a local small attorney will be a trustee. And if it's an attorney, so there's, especially if it's a state where it's very individualized, an attorney might be willing to take on a trust. Many times it's usually $500,000 minimums for most trust companies, $1 million or more, which sounds like a lot. But remember that example with the life insurance for the $5,000 a month potentially and what you might be able to leave. It's not about leaving it now. It's help preparing for after you're gone. So Hope Trust can work in every state as far as I know. And again, trust can be very complicated. They have some technology, and again, some of their platform for helping organize a lot of these things is also very independent of all the states as well, to help get everything together, whether or not you actually even use them as a trust company or not down the road. We do work with plenty of others, but they're just one of our favorite to, talk about and recommend, because they really approached it from the ground up and just, again, like how to best serve, the people with special needs. So, and again, they're the ones they're the ones who I thought of when they're staffed by social workers, right? Not bankers.
Yeah, and I don't think we should make this all too pretty, because let's be clear, these people charge by the hour, right, for their services. And, these fees add up very quickly.
They do.
So it really is a problem. When I speak to families who don't have sufficient means to create special needs trusts of a considerable size, this is really a problem. That's why I say it's a huge gap.
Yeah.
Anyway.
No, and again, local attorneys can sometimes be a good option for smaller dollar amounts. There's also what's called pooled trusts that in many states are usually a last resort. And those are a bit different. If it's a small amount, that's actually a time where an ABLE account might be a better option, and have the individual in charge of the ABLE account. So, and there are trust companies that do exist, by the way, that don't charge no matter how much you call, right? So there is an option, right? And there are options, and we work with, we work with all of them. We're agnostic. We just want to, help, again, the mission. But so there's pooled trust companies, but that's where the small dollar amounts may be leaving, the sibling some money in the $50,000 ABLE account is that's a lot better than paying $10,000 to an attorney to manage a $50,000 trust, if that makes sense. So I'm not saying it's the perfect answer. So I love this meme. Did you hear that the girl from this meme, by the way, she sold an NFT. I still don't even know what that is, for like some millions of somethings of dollars. Good for her. But I did read that in the news. So housing is complicated. It's more complicated than you might think, and you probably already think it's complicated. The easiest solution is not always best. So again, who will manage the property and everything that goes along with it? And even if you can find somebody like Hope Trust or somebody else, it costs money. It's not free. State waiver systems may help with the care, not the cost of housing around it. Section 8 vouchers are only a little part, and they have all their own fun criteria associated with them. So many times we find that parents are not delusional when it comes to housing. There's really no other way to put it. They are in a, look out, and thank you for explaining non-fungible tokens. I love the word fungible. It's probably one of my favorite words. And anyway, got distracted. So, but parents are just delusional when it comes to housing. So for example, one parent, they live in like the middle of nowhere in Northwest Connecticut, and, they're in a 55 and older community, like up a hill with like nothing around. And, they're like, oh, well, our son can stay there, right? After we pass away. What support is around there? What is around there, right? The individual, probably is not best served, like in the middle of nowhere. Is it close to transportation? Is it close to services? And a lot of times it's better to, set things up where maybe the house is sold and it can fund a special needs trust and rent an apartment, right? And you can use the investments to pay for that apartment income stream that provides, renting can be a good idea. It can provide for a lot. You can have everything included. The trust can mandate that heat and hot water and electric utilities are all included. I'm a landlord. I have a property manager. They asked a disabled tenant wanted to move in, and that they said, well, will you pay for the heat, hot water, electric, et cetera? I'm like, of course I will. That's great. It's good for me as the landlord. I'm thrilled. So to, get the more money and, provide that as the rent. So it can be much, much easier to manage. So
Yeah.
it's not.
Let me make
always-
it clear though, that Andrew, with our
Yes.
population, sometimes renting is really not an option,
No, yeah.
for some of the people with severe behaviors and who have who can be
I-
destructive and who sometimes need their own space and need their open space and need their fences and yada, yada.
Yes.
It's not as easy as with other disability groups.
I'm saying owning a home is not usually the best option, more so than renting is. if
But
that
I'm
makes sense.
saying that
Okay,
that's
yes,
a very
yes,
difficult option for a lot of
Yes.
our families. So I appreciate what you're saying about renting. I'm a landlord as well.
Yes.
I have many, many disabled tenants. And I
yes.
think it's a great solution for some people. For our people, not so much.
So then all the more reason to plan, right? But that's what we're saying. Think about the solutions and make sure that you actually can do what you want to do, right? We have to have tough conversations where they want to leave their person a house and it's financially unaffordable and it's not the option, right? So want to just make sure that people are being realistic with what it will take, and sometimes there aren't any good options. We want to really try to find the best one though, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And you mentioned Section 8 in passing, but that I want to say, as a special needs landlord, and I do have probably 3 of my tenants are on the more severe side. So, there is that. I mean, obviously it's possible in some cases. It's only possible because of Section 8. It's the only way these people can afford, right, to rent in the community. And it is, I'm editorializing here, but that's my job. It is an incredible shame, an incredible failing on the part of our housing system, principally our HUD, our federal housing system, that we don't have these vouchers available, right, to adults with severe autism in a lot of states. Like here in the SF Bay area, they're almost impossible to obtain. So these subsidies should be available and they're not. And that's part of the complication here. Okay, I'm done editorializing. I
no,
could
that was good.
rant. I could rant for days about
I know
this.
we could too. And I guess my whole point with this is there is no one answer. To Jill's point, it is complicated, right? Again, my point of the slide is literally that it's complicated and it's just not as simple. So if you're confused by what me and Jill were just talking about, good. It is complicated. Think about it. I found this one. I didn't even have
Wait.
to make this. What?
Can I ask one housing question? I'm sorry.
That's what you want.
When you have a house, let's say I'm sitting in my house right now, right? Let's say I want to put my house in the special needs trust, right? It's an asset of the special needs trust.
Yep.
And that happens, in my living trust, I say upon my death, my house is given to the special needs trust of my children. That's the mechanism for transferring ownership?
So that is one way to do it. I have actually seen where actually the house is owned separately, right? And the special needs trust will actually pay rent to the house that's owned by another trust, if that makes sense, especially maybe potentially if there's 2 individuals there, or it's to be split, or sometimes for other reasons and flexibility, right? That is one way to do it. But I've also seen the other way. That's really where I think it really depends on probably a lot of state things, and just a lot of individual circumstances. But correct, the house should be in a trust. It shouldn't pass as part of your will, which is, I think, kind of the main thing to go along with. It should be in some sort of trust, but there are situations, right? You threw out one against me on the previous one, so now it's my turn, right?
Mhm.
So.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. So I say this all the time to every single group I talk to, not just to severe, but to the when I'm talking about where the son's an actuary or going to be an actuary, right? And just all of them. It's the most important thing you can do because you can't fix it after you're gone. You will never know if the professionals you hired did a good job. And that's the truth about it. So estate planning, especially like the special needs planning, and a lot of these attorneys, right? And we see so many trusts, and I'm not an attorney, right? But I see so many trusts, and it's just the language is so bad and so poor. You just wonder, like, how do they care? To that example from before. And again, we get passionate about this, but it's the most important thing you can do. And referrals. Well, I think it's one of the most also thankless jobs of an attorney because you don't know whether the person usually giving the recommendation, right? Like, well, they haven't had to deal with the trust yet, right? Your children, everyone on this video, right? Your children aren't going to talk about how good the attorney is ever, right? So how do you know whether the attorney's doing a good job? How do you know whether the financial planner is doing a good job, right? So it's so important to make sure that they're qualified. Qualified doesn't just mean they're in the community. Elizabeth Yoder, who's been in the chat, does not have a family member with a disability. She does not have a disability herself. She is one of the most fierce advocates I have ever met. It will surprise nobody, especially Jill. We met because I hired her because we got in an argument over identity language, Jill, on Facebook. And I ended up hiring her. But she is an amazing, it was a polite professional argument for the record. But no, a colleague, it was nice correction. Anyway, my point is that, it's important to find somebody who's qualified, not just because of like their stance in like, the community, or sometimes because they're doing lots of webinars or presentations, and also think about like, are they going to be there? So look for that CELA, right? CELA, Certified Elder Law Attorney. That's one of my go-tos. That's the hardest to get. If you contact one and they're not local, they should be able to point you in the right direction. And it's just something where, if you can, try not to, skimp on it. Yeah. If there's any questions, I can take them now. I know Liz has been answering a bunch.
Yeah, I saw she's been answering a bunch. Let's go to some of the questions on Q&A.
Yeah.
And this will not be in any order. So some of these you kind of quasi answered already, but how can you assure that amounts of money, inheritances given to people on the spectrum go to the special needs fund of the person? Can I put a clause in the special needs fund that money goes into the special needs fund? Okay, this is not a very clear question.
I think I get it.
I think that the question is basically, how do you make sure if you're giving a gift or some sort of asset or something to the person with special needs, how do you make sure it ends up in the right place?
So if it's, so you can, as part of like a beneficiary designation, you can make sure it goes to the trust. So there should be a trust itself. A trust is like a person. So the trust has its own thing. And if you're concerned about somebody taking advantage of you, right? I mean, the trust should have a document. The money should never be made to them. A trust is like a corporation. So checks are written to so-and-so special needs trust. And the trusts are written in a way where it has to be used for the individual's benefit. That, there is oversight. There are these trust protectors. You can have two people sign off on things. There are ways to put protections in place. A lot of it depends on your individual circumstances. So I definitely would consult with, an attorney, legal professional on your individual circumstances. But make sure that your documents reflect what you want, because if you set up a trust and nothing goes to the trust because you didn't update your will, you didn't update your beneficiaries, and nothing goes to the trust, then the trust doesn't matter. And I've had that. I had where $750,000, it was the intent. The father was dying of ALS. And it was his intent when he opened the trust to fund the trust for his son. And he never updated the beneficiaries on his life insurance policy. So none of it went to the trust.
Oy. Okay, everybody update all your beneficiaries constantly.
That was one of the slides. So
yeah. could you lose Medicaid if your income is above a monthly limit?
You're going to love this answer. It's an attorney's favorite 2 words. It depends. Most likely income, Medicaid is most commonly the $2,000 asset limit. Medicaid can have an income limit, but it's so complicated per state. So you should make sure you see what Medicaid program you're on. A lot of times for adults on Medicaid, there can be higher, income limits or something temporarily. So the answer is be very cautious. I would assume the answer is yes, just to be on the safe side, but definitely check your individualized circumstances. It varies a lot, even within a state.
Okay, our son will draw from his father's Social Security effective this year. Oops, hold on. It disappeared.
I'm sorry, I just
Okay,
answered
you just
that one.
answered it.
You want to say the answer, Liz?
So this is if when the spouse reaches full eligibility, can they also receive the benefit as well? And how does the disabled adult child impact the spousal benefit? So the spousal benefit still can be received. We just want to caution slightly, not really, if there's just those 2 people, that you will want to review the eligible earners maximum benefit. So there's a family maximum that will be what Social Security will pay out to any individual. So if the family maximum is met by the people who will be receiving a benefit on the taxpayers' dollars, then a different strategy might be recommended because a reduction may occur. So it's unlikely that would happen with a spouse and 1 child on the disabled adult child benefit, but it is a caution that I would raise. Complicated.
Okay. All right, so I'm mindful of time. I'm sorry, because we're almost at 12:15, at least here in California. How about like 2 more questions, Andrew? Is that okay?
Yeah, sure. And again, I pay Liz a salary, so I'm volunteering her, right?
Yeah,
For
and
as long as-
everyone, I
yeah.
really, I recommend you go into the Q&A and look at her answers, because I'm reading it and I'm learning quite a bit. So thank you so
And,
much.
and just before I answer the couple questions again, in case people keep dropping off, you want to re-put our contact information. People can reach out to us. We don't turn
Yeah,
people
Liz, why
away.
don't you type in the contact information?
And we are financial planners. We do all of this with, this population in mind. If somebody reaches out to us with a small question, we always try our best to help. We don't turn people away. Even sometimes when we should add it. Liz knows who I'm talking about. No, but in all seriousness, we do this because we also really like to help people and advocate, and our website has some information too. But we're not gonna, if you reach out to us, we'll try to help you. We don't add you to some horrible spam or mailing list. I didn't even ask for, the mail. Everyone here, if anyone wants to sign up for our newsletter, it's actually pretty good, but you can. But we're here to provide good information to families. And if people can take some good things away, that's our goal. I do like to make money to donate to wonderful nonprofits, right? So, but on a very, again, serious note, feel free to, again, reach out to us in the future. If you have questions, if you want, just a free, anything doesn't sound right, we'd rather make sure that, the families get good information more above anything else. So.
Okay,
Sorry.
well, thank you.
Was that an okay plug? Was that a good?
Yeah, that plug is just
Okay.
fine.
Okay.
Here's a question that we could debate for the rest of the day from Rose. Is guardianship necessary?
So I would say
I can mention one thing about that before you get into yours. So for a lot of the time, guardianship is a medical consideration. So you want to be able to talk to your doctors. And I've had this conversation a couple of times. I was a caregiver for a woman who had very low verbal ability. I don't think she signed anything saying that I could speak for her or on her behalf. Nothing. She didn't have a guardian, no guardian. No doctor would go to her, ask her a question and get her response and not talk to me. They would always talk to me. So the fear about not talking to doctors is really, there are a couple doctors who will say, I need this, that, and the other thing signed, and I don't know if I can trust this person. They're going to talk to who they can get an answer from. So that's one statement that I'll make about guardianship. But Andrew, you can go off of that.
Your experience is not universal, by the way.
No,
No.
but
Is
there
any?
are,
Yeah.
and
Right.
there are a lot of people with my experience though. And I've talked to many of them saying, we've never had these documents in place, and they'll still talk to me. I'm like, yeah, because they want to get care. They want to give care to their patient.
And you can also accomplish that. And I'm not saying this now, we actually didn't put that in the slide because of the population that we're speaking to. It's not as applicable. I serve on Connecticut's support decision-making committee. I was voluntarily conserved. I'm a big advocate against it for people who don't need it. I'm going to, in the chat, have a nice little flyer, if that's okay, that actually I think explains this pretty well, just like a little flow chart, because who doesn't love flow charts on whether to consider it. I'd say, can you accomplish what you want without guardianship or conservatorship? If the answer is yes, then I do think less restrictive is always better. But if you need it, then you need it, right? I think it's a lot of ways it's that, simple. What's the least restrictive option where you can do it? And there's no wrong answer.
Yeah, I mean, listen, for our population, right, the severe autism population, generally the answer is yes, you need it, in my opinion. But you're right, for a lot of people with disabilities, it's not necessary. They can use powers of attorney, they can use informal means. There's a supported decision-making thing, which to this day, I don't really understand. And I feel in some cases can be very dangerous. But yeah, for our population, yeah, you really do. You want to be able to protect the rights, health, safety of your child, and do it in a legally recognized way. You also want somebody who's advocating for that child, who has a legal duty to act in their best interests, and who has some court supervision. And that's what guardianship and conservatorship provides. Anyway, with that, we are really over time. So I am going to call this quits. Thank you everyone for joining us. I will put this recording up. Andrew, kind of put your slides up as well?
Yes, of course.
On the site. And I know there are other questions, but as Andrew generously stated, he and Liz are happy to answer those offline. So feel free to email them. Okay. Any closing comments from Liz or Andrew?
The flow chart is attached here. Jill, if you want to send it out, it's really simple. I mean, I agree with you. The answer is probably yes, but it's about as simple as you can get.
Okay, I see it, and I might have you email it to me because it's taking a while.
I don't mind.
Okay, guys.
So, thank you, everyone.
Have a lovely day, everyone. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you at the next webinar.
Yep.